next question goes first to Congressman Spratt. The recent oil spill and yet another explosion in the Gulf has kind of highlighted the fact that we need some new long-range national energy policy. What are your plans for a comprehensive national energy policy? Does it still include offshore drilling? And to the degree that offshore drilling would or would not be curbed, what other elements would you include in a national energy policy? Congressman Spratt?
Well, it can include and should include in the proper places offshore drilling, no question about it. Before we go whole hog on additional offshore drilling, I think somebody needs to take a big broom and go through the Mineral Management Agency and clean it out. There's too much of a revolving door there, too many people who have a conflict there, and they have been called with their pants down, if I may use that metaphor, in the last few months as we witnessed what was happening in the Gulf of Mexico. There are other gas fields that can be tapped. There's a huge gas field in Alaska. We haven't been able to work out a pipeline, which would cost about $15 billion to go from there to the mid-United States. There are huge gas finds now being found in shale deposits and elsewhere in places like Arkansas. These can be tapped and should be tapped, and they'll give us clean energy into the future. I'm a strong believer in nuclear power. We ought to renew it. There ought to be a renaissance of nuclear power. We should extend debt guarantees to back financing for new reactors. We should resolve the spent fuel issues. I am a stalwart opponent of what the President's done with respect to Yucca Mountain. I think it is not supportable. And I think we ought to treat, in our environmental bills, we should treat nuclear power as renewable sources because it is clean if you keep it contained. Then there's energy, there's wind, there's solar, there's biomass. If you check my opponent's record, he voted against several of these alternatives at the South Carolina state level. And finally, don't leave out conservation and efficiency. It plays a big role. Jim Clyburn and I are about to pass a bill which will say that the South Carolina co-ops can go to their customers and do an energy assessment or audit of their home, make recommendations to improve the conservation of energy there, and then they can lend them the money to make those improvements, whatever they may be, and put that in their bill. And their expectation is that they can make these improvements, and by cutting the bill, the electricity bill, have no net increase for the customer. Things like that we can do if the federal government is really behind them and pushing innovation in a new way, as opposed to the old way of doing things. If you read Time magazine, you may, and I do occasionally, you may have seen the story recently about the Recovery Act, saying it's been a jobs bill, a counter-cyclical bill, but nobody recognizes what it is. A sixth of it, the money that's about to be spent out next, will be going to all kinds of different energy development programs. And that's something I strongly stand behind and believe we've got to do for our future. Become energy independent and do it with energies that are clean and renewable.
Thank you, Congressman Mulvaney.
One of the lessons that we learned or should have learned about the Gulf spill was that we're looking for oil in the wrong place. We're looking for places where it's hard to get to. We have it. We have it in places where it's easy to get to. The current leadership, by the way, disagrees with much of what Congressman Spratt just mentioned about drilling in Arkansas, drilling in Alaska. It took us about, 6 months, I think, to plug the spill in the Deepwater Horizon. Would have taken a fraction of that if it was in shallow water, where they're not allowed to drill. It would have taken a matter of only days if it happened in Alaska, where they're not allowed to drill. We are looking for energy in the wrong place. I agree with the Congressman, by the way, that we should take an all-of-the-above approach. I've been a strong supporter of nuclear, solar, wind energy. I'm not sure where he gets his information about how I voted against particular incentives. I've actually voted for a lot of the ideas that try and jumpstart some new energy ideas in South Carolina. I have voted against bills, by the way, that picks particular winning companies or losing companies. But I'm all for all of the options being on the table. I'm also for, by the way, government getting out of the way. I've got a constituent who called me and said, listen, I moved down from New York and I got these solar panels and I can't get the local electric company to buy it back for me. Can we pass a law? And I said, I got an idea. Have you called the power company? And he said, no. And I said, listen, I know these guys. We set up a meeting, and it is now the first net billing program in the upstate of South Carolina, in this region. And it happened without a single law. I'm for entrepreneurial creation of energy. I'm for individual solar. I'm for individual hydro, excuse me, they have the small, I can't remember what the name of it is. They put the generators in the rivers and you can generate your own electricity for your own property. There's tremendous ideas out there. But at every turn, it seems like we're beat back by the environmental lobby, who simply will push us to go places that are harder and harder for us to get our new energy sources. So I agree with the Congressman. I think we should have every effort that we can to become energy independent. I don't know if agreeing with him gets him his extra minute, but I thought we should maybe savor that for a moment.
All right, thank you very much. It's actually no rebuttal from the children because the first questioner mentioned the second. You remember the loophole. I told you these rules would come into play. I hope not.
Says the professor.
This next question does go to you first, State Senator Mulvaney. Recently in North Carolina, their congressional coalition has worked hard to pass the repeal of tariffs, which have helped very specific counties in North Carolina. It has had a trickle-down effect, actually, to one of the textile companies in South Carolina that deals with those textiles, but not all of the congressional coalition in North Carolina felt that they could support that because repealing those tariffs had such a narrow help to a few companies. It was seen as earmarks, helping their own district, their own county too much. So this question is about trying to increase employment here in the 5th District, here in the York County. What will you do as a United States Congressman to try and increase jobs back home?
No one is more familiar with the job situation in this district than I am. Unemployment in Lancaster County as recently as 2 months ago was 18 or 19%. It's about 20% in Chester County. That's just the reported rate. That's not the folks who actually claim. By the way, if you give up looking for a job, you're no longer considered to be unemployed the way we count unemployment. No one has seen that up close more than I. Simply not sustainable. We cannot sustain our societies with levels of employment 15, 20, 25%, which is what we're doing. People ask me, what would you do? The first thing we need to do is try and keep the jobs that we have. And to me, the biggest thing we can do to help keep the jobs that we have now is to repeal the health care bill. I have talked to employers, large and small. I have a letter from Caterpillar Tractor in my binder that says, Mr. President, Mrs. Pelosi, if you pass this bill, it's going to cost us $100 million more to stay and manufacture in the United States of America. They have 3 major plants in this district, 2 in Sumter and 1 in Newberry. Why would they stay? Why would they stay? We've already seen the impact of government regulation and passing laws that makes it advantageous for companies to leave the United States to manufacture. The healthcare is getting ready to make it disadvantageous for them to stay. So people ask me, why are you always talking about healthcare? Because it's not just about healthcare. It's about healthcare, it's about spending, and it's about jobs. We need to take every step that we can to protect the jobs that we have. I was talking to a small businessman in Pageland. Little business, $600,000 a year is going to cost him. Just to meet the new requirements of healthcare. He says, we can't afford it. Also, you take a look, by the way, at some of the healthcare provisions, and they go away if you have fewer than 50 or 25 employees. Talking to an employer who's got 51 employees. He says, I'd be a lot better off just letting these 2 people off and getting below the requirements for the healthcare bill. Think about that. We've created a disincentive for businesses to grow. What else can we do? We talked a little bit about it before. Give businesses the incentive again to grow. If you look at the details of the healthcare bill, what you'll see is there's a disincentive to get more than 11 employees. There's a disincentive to have more than 25 employees. There's a disincentive to have more than 50. There's a disincentive in the healthcare bill to pay for people more than $50,000 a year. The small business tax credit goes away if you pay somebody more than $50,000 a year in salary. Think about that for a second. We're giving disincentive to pay people more money at work. It's what we want. We want businesses to grow and to prosper. But come back to the capital gains tax. I think that's the other thing we could do to add new jobs, is to really reward people who will take chances and invest in their business. The money is there. You talk to any business, you know that it's there. They're afraid to invest because they think the environment is too risky. They don't know what the government is going to do, and they're not confident about the future. We need to allow them to be confident again.
Thank you, State Senator. Congressman Spratt, bringing jobs back home.
Well, I've spent the better part of my career fighting for the textile industry. Not successfully in the long run. In the short run, we bought time. And there's still survivors in this industry who count upon me for support because I'm the co-chair of the Textile Caucus and have been for years in the House of Representatives. If you look on television, you'll see my spot. You'll see Parkdale Mills represented there because they know what I've done to fight for their industry. Secondly, what do you do for jobs here? The best thing I can do is bring infrastructure and also bring R&D opportunities. I'll give you a good example. Just a few miles up the road, Cellguard, a spinoff of Celanese Corporation of America, has a small operation which is growing tremendously because they have the patent on several different lithium battery components that could be revolutionary. How do they get the money to exploit that discovery, those patents? I'll tell you how. They get it through Recovery Act money. That's why the President came down here to meet with them several months ago, because they are the beneficiaries of Recovery Act money, and they believe, as he believes, that we can go from 2% of the world market in lithium batteries to 40% over a period of 5 years. That kind of strategic objectives I think we need to set. As for small businesses and insurance, health insurance, I ran a small business. My family owned one. We had the first bank in River Hill, Bank of Fort Mill. South there is an MCB, Bank America Bank today. I was proud of the fact that this bank with 20 employees, we could give Blue Cross Blue Shield to our employees. And I'll tell you what it did, Nick. It allowed us to hire and retain better people than we otherwise would have attracted. And what we have done in this healthcare bill is bend over backwards to try to accommodate small business and make it attractive. For example, if you have a small business of 25 or fewer employees, and if their average wages are less than $40,000 per person, you can get a 35% tax credit if you want to give them health insurance as part of their payroll arrangement. That's a plus for that small business. As for those businesses that don't want to participate, the bill identifies them as being, if you have 50 or fewer employees, you don't have to participate. You don't have to participate. So there are a number of accommodations made in the bill to make the bill for small business, because that primarily is where the problem with uninsured lies. The firms that have not been able to afford insurance, and the object of the healthcare reform bill was to make it affordable to small business. I think that can be accomplished. Maybe not one sitting, one riding. I think it's the right step forward towards that goal eventually.
Thank you, Congressman Spratt. State Senator Mulvaney, would you like a 1 minute rebuttal?
Very briefly, because the Congressman mentioned a couple of things that I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk more about. Infrastructure, you heard that in the stimulus. 5% for roads and bridges. 5% of that $800 billion package actually went to roads and bridges. If you go ahead and you add in things like the electrical grid and clean water programs, you can get that number as high as 12%. All the rest of it went to transfer payments. So all the talk about the stimulus money going to put people back to work is simply not true. You also heard the Congressman talk about bending over backwards to help small business. If you own a small business, I want you to remember the bending over backwards line when you have to fill out your 1099s this year. Every small business in this country will have to send a 1099 to every other entity with which it does more than $600 worth of business. I told Pam, we checked in the hotel last night, we had a fundraiser in Hilton Head, and I would have had to get a 1099 form from them. Finally, I heard Mr. Spratt say that small business was helped by this incentives to help develop the batteries. I don't believe that small business needs government. I believe small business needs government to get out of